Hey everybody, Jane here, and I want to talk to you about the 17 books that I read in the month of June.
Pictures and patterns put into words that stream across the page, capturing life as soft spoken.
Alright guys, before we get started, a couple things. First off, let's go over my stats. They have not been great this month. So I read 17 books, and my goal has been to read 50% owned books and 50% books that I don't own. And unfortunately, this has been a really bad month for owned books. Of the 17 books I read, I only read one book that I owned, which is obviously very well below that percentage. I also wanted to read 10% indie authors. And I only read one that I am 100% sure is indie. I think another of these books started out as indie, but then got picked up by a regular publisher. But I didn't want to count that as indie because I wasn't sure. And so this is just one of these 17 is indie, which is again a little below that 10% mark. So not a great month for my reading goals. The other thing I wanted to let you know is I did do a vlog where I did Pride Reads that is already posted, and I will link it down below. Some of these books I'm going to go over, I talk about in more depth in that vlog. So if I am reading a book, or if I'm indicating a book that was in the vlog and you want more information, hop over to the blog and you can hear more of what I have to say. So let's get started. This reading month has felt kind of weird. I read 17 books, but a lot of these were shorter reads, manga, audio, and also I just felt like a lot of these books were very mid. I didn't have many books that I loved, and I didn't have many books that really stood out to me, and I had a lot of books that I kind of felt at different points that I was slogging through a little bit. So despite that, I had no DNFs this month, not a single one. I had no 1 stars and no 2 stars. For me and my personal rating system, 1 stars are books that I find either very, very offensive, the content, to the point that I don't think most people who are people would appreciate reading them. Or they're just so poorly written that they are unreadable. That is a category I don't put things into very often. I have before downloaded a few books on my Kindle that made absolutely no sense, or the writing was so poor I couldn't figure out what the author was saying. Usually, though, I'm going to be DNFing those books. I'm not going to fight through a 1-star book. The only exception I would think of is like if a book gets to the end and then does something that I think is so overtly upsetting or offensive that I think most people would not want to read it. And I think the book is, more or less unreadable from that standpoint. I don't know that I've given a 1-star on this channel, but I might have. A 2-star, which I have given, but I don't give often, are books that I think objectively are not good. So these are books that there is a major problem that I see in the storytelling that impacted how I experience the story. That can be varying things. It's not a rating that I give very often, but occasionally I do. This month I do not have any 2 stars either. So we're going to get on to my 3 stars. A 3-star book for me is a book that was fine. It might have had a couple things in it that I thought it didn't do great, but it was a story. I just maybe didn't enjoy it that much, or I thought it was an okay story, but maybe some of the stuff it didn't work for me. these are ones also that might be a not for me type book. So 3 stars are not bad, but they're not ones that I loved either. So I just wanted to be clear as I'm talking about my ratings in the books in this category, kind of how that works for me, or what I mean. I did do a video years ago about how I rate books, but I just wanted to reiterate that as we have this discussion. So the first book that I read for that I'm putting in the 3-star. I'm not normally I do them by like least favorite to most favorite. I'm just clumping them together star rating wise. So I'm going to do the 3 stars and then I'll let you know when I'm on to the 4 stars. The 3 stars in no particular order. The first is This Winter. This Winter is a novella, and it's labeled as a novella, but I would call it actually a short story. And it is in the Heartstopper world. Now, I have only read the first Heartstopper, and possibly if I'd read more of them, I would feel differently about the story. This story is just a little short story about the holidays and about Charlie and Nick during the holidays. And it also features, I want to say it's Nick's sister, but I might be wrong about that. One of them has a sister, and she features as a character in the story. And I didn't think this was bad. I'm not deep enough in the Heartstopper world, I guess, that I care. And when I looked at this, it seemed like you could read it as a 1.5. And I don't necessarily feel this is a 1.5. There was a lot of things that aren't revealed yet in the Heartstoppers books that come into play in This Winter. But also I didn't really feel like anything happened other than people being like, the holidays are rough. I think if you love Nick and Charlie and just want to see them in a holiday, this could be a really good book for you. It just kind of missed the mark for me, and it is one that is in my Pride vlog. Another book that was in my Pride vlog was a Spindle Splintered. This is a retelling of Sleeping Beauty. We have a girl who goes through a portal world and falls into a Sleeping Beauty-esque story. It was fine. I thought it was very short, and while I loved the discussions that were had, I thought the story itself was a little bit lacking. I am going to read the next book in the series just to see how I jive with it, but I did enjoy the first one. I just thought that it was more big conversations than actual story, and I would have liked a little more actual story. The next book was Book Boyfriend. This book, also in the vlog, in the reading vlog, I think all of my 3 stars were in that reading vlog, actually. So this book, I think my biggest issue with, well, let me back up and tell you what it's about. We have PK, who is, I don't want to say he's kind of a man-child, but we get the impression that he is an adult, but he's kind of riding mom and dad's coattails a little bit, etc. His best friend has just had a bad breakup, and he invites his best friend Artie to come live with him. Well, he's always had a secret crush on Artie, and like they shared a drunken kiss years ago, but they've never like discussed their feelings, and they're just besties. Well, he decides that he does not want to tell his roommate that he's into him. And so what he does instead is write a book all about his feelings for this roommate. And he assumes that as soon as his roommate reads this, even though he's writing it under a pen name, that his roommate will realize his feelings for him. I had a lot of issues with this book. I didn't like PK, and I didn't really like the relationship. We know that PK is obsessed with his roommate, but we don't really know why. Like, I didn't feel the chemistry. It just didn't work for me on a lot of levels. I thought the idea was kind of cool, but the execution didn't work for me. The next book is one in a series that I've really enjoyed. And this book was fine. It just didn't quite hit how I wanted it to, and that is Come Tumbling Down. This is part of the Wayward Children series. Now, since this is kind of deeply into the series, I won't go too detailed about what it's about, but the Wayward Children series is a series about teenagers who go into portal worlds. And if they've come out of their portal worlds but had positive experiences and missed their portal worlds, they go to the school for wayward children, who are all children who've come out of their portal worlds. This series tends to alternate, like one book will be a portal world experience story and the next will be one of the plot lines at the school. This particular book was a plot line at the school, and it featured two characters from several previous books who I didn't enjoy very much as the main characters, and that was Jack and Jill. So this is a continuation of Jack and Jill's story, and I just didn't love Jack and Jill to begin with, and this book didn't really do anything for me. I didn't think it was bad. I thought that since we've already done a lot of exploring of Jack and Jill's world, this book didn't bring as much to the table for me to enjoy as some of the other books had. Additionally, I would say that I just found it kind of boring in a lot of places. It was like, okay, we're back to the antics of Jack and Jill. I don't think after the story that there's going to be more Jack and Jill in the series, which makes me quite happy because it felt like everything got resolved in their story and they can just continue on. So I'm hoping that was the last time we have to deal with Jack and Jill. It wasn't a bad book. I do want to continue the series. I just kind of was over it. The next book, I will tell you, is probably the one I have the strongest feelings for in my 3 stars, and that is The Fake Dating Game. This book is about Holden. He wants to go and play in this game, try out for this game show. For those of you who are a little bit younger, or I mean older, I guess, those of you who are a little older, closer to my age, you probably have heard of Supermarket Sweep. That is what this game show reminds me of. It's called something else. It's called Market Mania, Madcap Market. But it has Supermarket Sweep vibes if you also added like physical obstacles. And so anyway, Holden, let me back up. Holden, the first chapter is like trying to convince his boyfriend to go and try out for him. And his boyfriend's like, no. And as a matter of fact, I don't love you anymore. Let's break up. So Holden and his boyfriend break up, and Holden goes out to try to audition, but you need like a second person. And he had a friend that was out where the auditions were taking place that he thought would join him, but his friend wasn't able to. And he meets this guy at a hotel named Leo, and Leo ends up auditioning with him, but they have to fake being in a relationship in order to audition. This book didn't work for me a lot. And I think based on like what Goodreads has said, there's a lot of people it's not going to work for, but that doesn't mean it won't work for you. So a couple things. This book is a romance written by a man. And yes, our characters are 2 men, but it is very smut forward as opposed to relationship forward. And I think that was a complaint that a lot of the readers had on Goodreads, and it was one of my complaints as well, is there was a lot of stuff, and it almost felt to me in certain places like the creepy DMs that you get from strange guys. Or, you know, you're talking to a guy online for 5 minutes and he's like, so, I got that type of vibe from this book. Now, it is possible that this book was intended more for a male audience than a female audience, because, I mean, it is written by a man and we have two men in a relationship. I would also say, from the things I've heard from gay men friends, that a lot of the depiction is fairly accurate, at least in certain circles. But personally, some of the smexy stuff, most of the smexy stuff, gave me a bit of the ick. And it may give you a bit of the ick too. Aside from the smexy stuff, I didn't really like Leo. I didn't think he was bad, but I wasn't falling for him. And I didn't like pretty much everything that happened from the middle of the book on. The first half of the book I actually really enjoyed. So we learn why this game is so important to Holden, and I really appreciated that. This book has some really good discussions of family relationships and grief, and it just was very beautiful learning why Holden wanted to do this to begin with. And I did appreciate that whole discussion. Around the midpoint of the book, we have an antagonist show up who I didn't really understand their motives, and also, without getting spoilery, I felt like this book is sold to you as like a game show game, like a game show book. And I didn't feel like the game show part of it was as featured as I wanted it to be. Also, I felt like there is a third act breakup in this book. I felt like the third act breakup didn't work for me, and I wasn't sure the resolution worked for me either. So like everything from about the half point mark was a miss for me, which was really sad because I think this book had some really great ideas and great things it was trying to do, and it just, for me, was a huge miss. Not enough of a miss to be a 2-star, because I think this is probably right for the right audience. The right audience just was not me. And like I said, based on other people's looking on Goodreads, I was not the only one who found some of the smexy stuff a bit of an ick. So proceed with caution, know what you're getting into if you decide to pick up this book. All right, that was the end of my 3-star reads. So let's move on to the 4-star reads. Most of these are books in the series that I'm going to go through fairly quickly because I can't get too in detail because we're pretty far into the series. But not all of them. So the first book is actually one that was also in my vlog, and it is Brokeback Mountain. This is the book that the movie is based on. We have two guys. Enos is one of them, and I can't remember the second guy's name. They are taking care of some sheep, and they have a thing. And this book really explores that. It is not particularly spicy. It is an interesting book because these guys are not really processing their feelings very well along the way, I don't think. But it was interesting. And the writing style I really found interesting. And I know in the vlog I described it as being almost feeling like a Stephen King type writing. And I don't mean meandering, because Stephen King does tend to meander. This was very straightforward, very short. But just some of the ways that the book was written made me think, oh, this kind of reminds me of Stephen King's writing style. So it's not a horror, however. But it was really good, and I really enjoyed it, and I think it's worth reading. The next one was a nonfiction, and this one is also in my vlog, and that was Stonewall. So Stonewall is about the Stonewall riots, which is how we got Pride. It is a nonfiction. It was good. I had a lot of really impactful emotional moments reading it, based on like where things used to be and how far we've come for, you know, the rights of LGBTQIA people. I am aware that there's still so far to go, but man, that book like put a whole different perspective on where things were. Like, it hit so hard. I loved it. It is a nonfiction, and nonfiction's only so interesting, only so entertaining. It's not a favorite, but I really enjoyed it. It occurred to me, I don't think I explained what a 4-star read is to me. Let me back up. So a 4-star, because I explained to you what a 3-star is. A 4-star for me is a book I really liked, but I didn't love. So this is a book that I think is above average. I enjoyed it. I had a good time with it, but it doesn't hit the 5-star mark. It's not exceptional. It's not a new favorite. It's not something I just love. And it's not a book also that I would say is flawless. Because sometimes I'll do a book as a 5-star because I enjoyed it and I don't have any complaints. Even if it's not necessarily a new favorite, I really liked it. But a 4-star for me is still very good. It's an above average read that I enjoyed. All right, so Stonewall was a 4-star, above average read. It was a nonfiction, really enjoyed it. The next book is, I think, the first one so far that has not been on my vlog, and that is Bad Mormon. This is another nonfiction book, and this book is about Heather, who I think is her name. She is a lady who has been on The Real Housewives of Utah, and she talks about her experiences kind of growing up in Mormonism, and then how she got to like being on the show and things like that. For those who don't know, I grew up Mormon. It's something I've kind of talked about, although I don't know if I've explicitly said what religion. I've just said typically a high demand religion. And so I really enjoyed a lot of her growing up. There are parts of this book that, since I have not watched The Real Housewives of Salt Lake, I didn't care about, didn't know about, didn't like. There's parts where she talks about like getting on the show and the hair and the makeup and the dinners and this and that and this, and I didn't care about very much of that, but I did very much care about her experiences in Mormonism and how that shaped her, especially as she started to kind of leave Mormonism, as I have also done. So that was a good one. Really enjoyed it. Dragged a little bit on parts that I didn't care about, but that's probably a me problem because I haven't watched her show. The next book is Barbarian's Heart. This is the next book in the Ice Planet Barbarian series. And this book is Stacy's book. And I really enjoy the Ice Planet Barbarian series. I guess I should back up. For those who don't know, Ice Planet Barbarians is about these girls. They are taken by aliens and they end up on this ice planet they call Not Hoth, and they find that they can become the fated mates of these aliens that live there. These very tall, blue-tailed aliens. And I really enjoy the series. Different books hit differently for me. And this particular book I liked but didn't love. So this is Stacy's book. Stacy is a character who in previous books was already in a relationship. She was already fated mates with her husband. Pashov, I think is his name. All the guys have crazy names, and I can never remember the guy's names. Like a girl's name, like Stacy, I can do. But the guys' names I always have a hard time with. There's a couple that stand out, but most of them I'm like, they all sound kind of the same. And I tend to read these as audiobooks, although I haven't exclusively read them as audios. This one, Stacy's, was as an audio. And in this one, Stacy's husband, in the last book, developed amnesia. And so they are dealing with his amnesia, and it's kind of an amnesia romance. And I didn't love this book. I thought Stacy, I understood where Stacy was coming from, but I got mad at her a whole lot as she was being very impatient about his recovery. I thought he was a great guy, I also felt like they just needed to sit down and talk, and that would have solved 90% of the problems they were having, because she kept assuming this stuff, but we know from his POV that that's not what he's doing or why he's doing things. And I just wanted to be like, could y'all just sit down and talk to each other for 2 minutes? And then we don't have to have this book. Like, yes, you have amnesia, and that sucks. And yes, you'd like your husband not to have amnesia, but that's not something he can fix. He's not doing it on purpose. And so now you need to sit down and communicate past the amnesia. So, I liked it because it's still Ice Planet Barbarians and I'm having a good time with the series, and it wasn't bad. It was still an above average book that I had a good time with. But I didn't like Stacy as much as I've liked some of the other women. I didn't like this couple story as much as I've liked some of the other couples. There were a couple important plot things that happened, which I was cool with. But overall, it was kind of a meh for me. In the Ice Planet Barbarians series meh. Like, I don't hate it. It's an above average book. Will continue to read. Would reread this when it comes to print and has like added content as the print books do. I'll probably reread it. But it didn't hit the way that some of the other Ice Planet books have hit. All right, the next book, I read Blood on the Tracks, Volume 8 and 9. I've already taken 8 back to the library. This is 9. This is a series about a boy who's a little bit sheltered, got kind of an overbearing mother, who's a little bit weird and helicoptery. And an incident happens where his cousin is injured on a family trip. His mom may have something to do with it. And he was a witness to what happened. I don't want to give any more away. Like I said, we're at this is book 9. I think there's 17 books in the series. And I have been told that through volume 10 is more like a prologue, and then everything after that is the main story. So I guess I'm getting there. I thought we were in the main story. I find this absolutely horrific in the best of ways. It definitely is the complexity of, this is my mother and I love her and she's taken such good care of me and I'm devoted to her, but then she's doing some weird things that I don't fully understand. And she's kind of a confusing person, and I'm not sure if she's a safe person. But then also, like, I love my mother. And so it's interesting. And his mom, again, I'm sure there's more reveals to happen, but I'm pretty sure his mom is just a psycho crazy person. But these have been so good. If you liked Flowers in the Attic for the complexity of the mother-child relationship, you will probably enjoy this. Because, like, I loved Flowers in the Attic, but, like, I loved that terror and horror of the person you're supposed to love the most and trust the most is the person out to get you. And the person who, like, you think the world of is the person who you can't trust. And there's that vibe in this book, and I love it. So both 8 and 9 were 4 stars for me. The next one is also part of a manga series, and that is Ascendance of a Bookworm, and this is part 1, volume 5. I'm enjoying this series. This is about a girl who's obsessed with books. She actually dies by a pile of books popping on her head, wakes up after death in the body of a little girl in a fantasy world. The little girl is about 4 or 5 years old, and she was like older when she died, like not 30s old, but like 20s maybe. And anyway, she's just like, okay, this kind of sucks, but I need books. And this world doesn't really have books. And so she's trying to make books happen. And it's kind of just lovely. It's a fun little thing of, you know, a Portal world story where this girl is just very single-mindedly trying to make books. And I don't know why I love it, but I really do. So I'm going to continue. I'm enjoying this. If you are just a complete bookworm and you enjoy manga, this series is worth reading. Again, just the passion for books that she has is just so fun. The next book I have is also a manga, and it is My Gently Raised Beast, Volume 3. I really enjoyed Volume 1. I didn't really like Volume 2. This one I enjoyed again. And basically, this is about a girl who she's the father of, I don't know if he's a king or he's a nobleman of some kind. The daughter of a nobleman, but she was from a previous relationship. Her mother died and her father has like gotten custody of her, but he has since like married and had 2 other children, and so she's kind of the even though she's the half sibling, they treat her like a step sibling, and she's not treated real well in the palace. There is these shifters, cat shifters, leopard shifters. There's a picture of him in his form on the back there. There's these leopard shifters, and one of them meets her and befriends her and is obviously having some feelings for her. And we're just learning more about the world as time continues. I'm enjoying it. I don't know if I'll get through the whole series because I'm kind of so-and-so. The last book I found really confusing. I understood this one better. I like it, but I don't necessarily love this series like I love the other 2 series of manga that I just mentioned to you. So, gonna continue at least for now. Did enjoy this volume pretty well. The next book we have is our last manga on this list, and that is Beastars Volume 7. This is about a school that has animals that are herbivores and carnivores, and they're trying not to kill anybody. That's kind of simplistic. There was in the first book a student who died, and presumably a carnivore did it. So there's kind of an underlying mystery of who killed the character in the first book. And then some other stuff going on, including we have a little romance between a herbivore and a carnivore that I'm here for. I am enjoying the series. I did not like the first book. And had I not known what was going to happen later, I probably would have stopped at book 1 and been like, meh. But then I read book 2 and really liked it. And as we continue, I am really enjoying this series. One of our main characters also, actually several of our main characters also are involved in the drama club. And since I am a theater nerd, I especially love that. Yes, bring on all the drama club stuff. So I am enjoying the series still. If you like manga and you like the idea of herbivores, carnivores, and particularly like a carnivore trying to deal with his meat-eating desires, but also being in love with an herbivore and obviously not wanting to eat her, at least not in that way, check it out. The next book is Magical Boy, Volume 1. Now, I only read Volume 1 and didn't read Volume 2, and this was for my part of my vlog. And in this one, we have a character who is a trans boy, and he gets powers that have been passed down the matriarchal line through his family. So he's trying to deal with these new powers and what they mean and how they affect him being a trans boy. And it was a good read. I gave it a 4-star and I really enjoyed it. All right, the last 4-star I have is a nonfiction, and this was again in my vlog, and that is Skirting Gender. So I didn't really know when I picked this up what it was, but the best way I could describe this to you is how to be a crossdresser 101. This book is written by somebody who's a crossdresser, and I found them because they are someone I've watched their YouTube channel. In their YouTube channel, they're very male presenting, and at first I didn't realize that's not the case so much now. Now they're much more ambiguously presenting on their YouTube, at least the last time I checked. I haven't watched as much of their content recently because it hasn't been things that was as interesting to me. They weren't somebody who I watched all the time, just sometimes casually. And anyway, one day I was looking at the description box underneath their video, and they'd written a book, so I checked it out. The first part of this book is very interesting. It's kind of autobiographical. And then the vast majority of this book is information about things like if you're a cross-dresser, how to get clothing, how to put on nails, and how you should do your hair, whether you should get your ears pierced. And then the back part of this book was kind of more big picture things like if you're a cross-dresser, understanding how you view gender and whether you should come out to people, and does being a cross-dresser mean that you're gay? A lot of complicated questions. So I had a good time with this book. I would not want to read this cover to cover personally, like really quickly. I read it in very small pieces. So I did mention in my blog that what I did was I put this in the bathroom as a bathroom book, and just when I would go and use the bathroom, I'd read a section because it's got some really lovely just like little sections here that are a page or so long. Then you get to a new section. And so that made it really readable for short amounts of time. I would say if you are going to pick this up and you are not a dresser, just know that a lot of the information may be less interesting to you. It may be, but I found a lot of it not very interesting because, things like hair and makeup and fake eyelashes and stuff, like, that's not really relevant to me the way that it would be to somebody who is new to cross-dressing. I do think that it was an interesting read, and if this is a book that you want or need, you should pick it up. It was fun. I love the authorial voice. I did have a good time with it. I just got kind of bored with the middle because the content wasn't stuff that I needed, but I thought the beginning and ending were very strong, and I liked that I read it in small sections. That made it very readable for me. So yeah, if you think that this book is something that you want to read, I would say go for it. All right, guys, we are getting on to my 5 stars. 5 stars are books that I either think are really, really above average. So really good books. Books that I think, I don't want to say are flawless because I don't think any book is flawless, but either books that I thought were very technically well done, that I didn't have any complaints with really, and that I also enjoyed. These also may in some cases be books that may have kind of missed the mark certain places, but I loved, or that I just felt like held a special place in my heart. And the first one is from a vlog I did for reading contemporary romance. And I put that out at the beginning of June. So it was the first book I read in June, and I started it in May. And it is The Bodyguard. It has been a hot minute since I read this book, but I remember that it is about this girl who is hired to be a bodyguard to this actor, and they don't want to upset his family because he's coming home to tend to his sick mother, and they don't want his parents to be like, oh my gosh, there's been some threats on you, you're in danger. And so they're doing kind of a fake dating thing. They're doing a fake dating thing, and he's all like, this is my girlfriend, and she's like, sure I am, but she's actually his bodyguard. And she's working with this like other group of bodyguards people to try to keep him safe while he's at home, but also like as they're hanging out, they have to pretend they're dating and they're kind of falling in love, and I really enjoyed it. I will tell you, for people who might read this, there's a thing that happens towards the end, and the author tricked me, and I don't get tricked very easy. And I was like, oh, this thing might have just ruined the whole book for me. I don't think we can come back from this. This is horrible. But then we did, and it was wonderful. So I thought it was a really well done book, and I had a good time with it. The last book that I read that we're doing in this wrap up was another Ice Planet Barbarian, and that was Barbarian's Hope. And this is Asha's story. You guys, I really enjoyed this, but it's not one of my new favorites. So there's a lot of the Ice Planet Barbarians that I think I liked a little bit more. But this one still hit. Like, to the point of I was listening to it as an audiobook and driving, and I had to turn it off because I could not safely drive because I was like crying so badly because of the intense emotions. So Asha is a character in Ice Planet Barbarians who is one of the aliens that is on alien females on the planet that already has a husband when the human females arrive. Now Asha and her husband have not been getting along for a really long time because prior to the humans' arrival, Asha had lost a child. And she has just a lot of grief about losing this child, and her husband and her have not fully been able to kind of get their relationship back together after the loss of their daughter. And man, all of the grief stuff in this book was so good. I've never lost a child, but I do have infertility. And seeing Asha go through the desire to have a child, the the feelings of, frustration that everybody else gets these babies and she just wants nothing more than a baby in the world and she can't have one. And, she had one and it died, and now there's everybody here having all these babies, and what in the world did she do to the universe to not deserve to have a baby when, and I, it was an emotional read for me. There is a subplot of holiday stuff. I do feel like to read this one and fully understand it, you need to have read Ice Planet Barbarians Holidays, which I have not read. This book convinced me to download it on my Kindle. It was a short story involving the Ice Planet Barbarians' previous, holiday celebrations early on in their history, if you will. And I do feel like you'd want to read that before Asha's story, but man, it just ripped my heart out so much. And she's not the only. This is not the only time we've dealt with infertility or wanting a baby and not having one in Ice Planet Barbarians. The third book, I can't remember what it's called, but it's Kira's story. We also have a character who is struggling with infertility and really wants a baby very badly, but cannot have one because of a health issue. And that story also hit me kind of in the same place this one did. Now, I do like Kira's story a little bit better. And I would say another one kind of who has a similar vibe is Josie's story. So with Josie, she's one of the girls in Ice Planet Barbarians, and all she's ever wanted is a husband and children. And you have a very deep longing in her for that. Her story is a little more complicated and doesn't necessarily fall quite as much to the baby fever as either Asha or Kara's, but I think if that's your vibe, if you really liked Kira's story and if you really liked Josie's story for the elements of one of the characters who really wants children and yet is in this kind of complicated situation with her mate, I think this will really hit for you because her and her mate ultimately have to figure out how to come back together and reconnect and sort through the loss that they suffered while dealing with all the stuff. So it hit me in the feels so much. And for life reasons, it was a really rough time for me to be reading this book, and I think it hit extra hard for me. So if you are in any kind of stages of longing for children that you can't have, just know that going in, that this is probably going to be an emotional ride for you. It was a rough one for me, but it was so good and it hit me in the feels. So, yeah, I am excited to continue on in the series. I don't expect to have as serious an emotional reaction to the next couple books, based on like what the topics are, but who knows, I might. But I really like the for me, while I know that a lot of people are reading the Ice Planet Barbarian books for the Smexy times, and I do like the Smexy times. For me, I love the exploration of characters and, the difficulties these women are going through, and sometimes the men as well. But I really felt like this one, we got Asha's, heart, and and I didn't like Asha very well when she appeared as a side character, but in this book, I didn't like her, but I think that we understand better of where she's coming from, and she's kind of one of those people who's terribly mean and awful, but she's mean and awful because she's just hurting so bad she doesn't know what to do with herself. And so I think she is I think she becomes a forgivable character in this. So anyway, those were the books that I read in June. Please tell me below what you read in June and if it was any good. If you've read any of the books I read, I would love to know your experience with them. If you read the Spindle Splintered one, did you like the second book? Or was it too far off the mark for you? Because I liked but didn't love the first book, and I do want to try the second book, but I'm kind of mad about it. Yeah. Also, if you want to put any suggestions for LGBTQIA reads down below, I do read them year round, but I also do a vlog of special LGBTQIA reads. All right. Also, please like, comment, subscribe, and if you made it all the way through this video and didn't want to leave a comment about a book I read or a book you read, if you want to put a little book emoji, that would be great. And I will see you next time. This has been Jane. Bye.